housekeeping items that will make this webinar also technically better for everyone. First of all, the webinar is recorded, and we plan to make the recording available on the website afterwards. Then we are asking all participants to mute their microphones and also disable the videos when they are not speaking, because this will save bandwidth then for the presenter. And the presenters, we are asking them that after they have finished showing the presentation, then to enable their videos that we could also see them. Because in these days, it is very nice to see people who are outside your own household, even if these people are only on screen. Then questions and comments, please provide via the chat. And via chat, you can also add comments, additional information or links, because together with recording the webinar, we will record also the chat and make all this information available to everyone afterwards. Papers and presentations are on the web in English and Russian, including a number of quite interesting background papers which will not be presented today because of the lack of time. So with this, I wish everyone a very interesting, inspiring, and useful webinar. We keep fingers crossed that technically it will run well. And then thank you for attention, and I give floor to Joanne and Natalia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tina, and thank you to everyone for coming together like this. I really miss seeing you all in person, but this is working well, and given our commitment to a sustainable planet, it's rather fitting that we're meeting virtually. We've called this session Beyond the Indicators, as Tina described very well there. I know it's a huge amount just to prepare the indicators. There's a lot of work to do, but as Tina also summed up so well, that unless it's used, it's not useful. We need to know that our data is being used to shape decisions for a sustainable future. And in these strange times, actually, we are really seeing that. This pandemic has led to a demand for data such as I've not seen before. You know, we're seeing statistics presented every day on the news here. And people are thinking about data in the way that we think about it in SDGs. So who is most vulnerable? Who's at risk of being left behind? And they need that data so that they can make their decisions. And also, how are these factors interlinked? I mean, here we're seeing a health issue that's having a huge impact on our economy, on our education systems, on wider sort of the fabric of society. And we will need plenty of analysis to understand that. But today our focus is on how to get people to use data, how to engage with people over data when we don't have such intense demand. And we're going to be hearing from Magda from Statistics Poland about how they have engaged with businesses, and from Petra at UNIDO to hear about how they monitor the indicators that they are responsible for. And then I'll pass you on to Natalia, who will lead the second part of the webinar. And I think Tina's gone through all the housekeeping. So Magda, if you're ready, would you like to start sharing your screen?
Yes, of course. I have
Thank you.
All necessary buttons.
Yes. Hello.
It will take me a minute. Oh. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can see it now. Thank you.
So I'm ready to start. I'd like to say hello to everyone. It's very nice to not to see you, but to know that there are so many people on the other side. My name is Magdalena Androch. I represent Statistics Poland, and I'd like to present you today this unique tool that has been built in my country, especially to support business in assessing its impact on SDGs. And let me start with a short introduction of the origins of this idea and of the partners. There are many stakeholders acting for SDGs in Poland, and the Ministry of Economic Development is responsible for the overall framework for the institutional framework for.
Magda, excuse me, you are a little bit, the voice is not very loud. Can you maybe speak closer to the microphone? Yes.
Now?
Thank you. It's better.
So the Ministry of Economic Development is responsible for the overall institutional framework for partnership, and Statistics Poland gives the information support. The Statistics Poland has been very active in this field since the very beginning of the idea of the SDGs. So in the results, many institutions and organizations invite us to take part, to join the projects and initiatives. The example of such an initiative that we have been invited to take part in is the 17 Goals campaign, which was initiated by the CSR Consulting. CSR Consulting is a company that supports entrepreneurs in building their strategies for corporate social responsibility. Business has a crucial role to play with regards to SDGs, as the government is responsible for the overall organizational, institutional, and legal framework that should foster the implementation of the 2030 agenda. But this is business, these are entrepreneurs who create the real changes that make production or labor market sustainable and responsible. And that is why CSR Consulting launched the 17 Goals campaign to mobilize business, to encourage entrepreneurs to act for SDGs. This campaign gathers the representatives of big companies from Poland and also from NGOs, academia, and official institutions like the Ministry or Statistics Poland.
Magda,
yes?
Sorry to interrupt. If you turn your video off just while you're talking and then turn it on after, the sound might come through clearer. It keeps breaking up a tiny bit.
I will try, but now I cannot see this button for the video.
Ah, okay. Okay. Maybe don't worry.
Yes, I found it. It's okay. Yes, done. So to come back, cooperating with business, CSR Consulting realized that entrepreneurs are really wanting and willing to act for SDGs, but very often they do not know exactly how to approach to this topic and how to link their challenges into particular goals, and they do it very intuitively. What are the reasons? First of all, the knowledge about the 2030 agenda is still not very common and very deep among our society and among business as well. Entrepreneurs, even if they know something, even if they've heard about the SDGs, they do not know actually the particular goals, and they do not know how to link their challenges to particular targets. They often do not have any strategy focused on sustainable development, and even if there is some plan, very often it's not monitored on the basis of reliable statistical information. SDG data are not very well known among business, and even they are not considered as useful for this purpose. they are more relevant to observe the overall macroeconomic changes, and they do not describe the situation, the progress made by the individual companies. So the conclusion was that the business needs something more and something else. First of all, it needs guidelines how to focus on SDGs, which activities are in line with which sustainable development goals, and what kind of data will be useful for monitoring, for assessing the progress made by individual entrepreneurs. So that is how the idea of Impact Barometer was born. The aim of this project was to select these goals on which business has the highest impact, highest influence, and on which it may focus on, and then to propose such indicators which could be useful for assessing the progress made. The initiative was carried out in the form of meetings and workshops organized by TSR Consulting and Statistics Poland. And in these meetings took part representatives from big companies, from NGOs, from academia, and from government, and of course from Statistics Poland. But our experts didn't play the usual role. We didn't provide the data, we didn't build the indicators, because the majority of ideas for indicators came directly from business. The business knows the best its concerns, its challenges, specific, and what is more, it also knows the scope of information that it has got on its disposal and may use for monitoring. Statistics plays rather the role of a mentor who takes care after the right direction of a discussion. We tried to explain how to translate SDG data and particular concrete challenges into statistical information, statistical indicators. We also were explaining what kind of characteristics should have the indicator to correctly play its monitoring role. We of course paid the high attention to methodological issues, to common and unified understanding of use concepts, which is crucial for comparability and for analysis. This was a very unusual role for us and very unusual experience, because we had to cross our borders. We had to go beyond official statistics and official way of thinking. The meetings had rather informal form and the discussion was very vivid, but our partner was also unusual. We had to acknowledge, we had to be aware that it has special concerns, special needs, and special knowledge. Very often the things, the issues that were obvious for us were not obvious for our partners. So we had to adjust our way of communication, of a dialogue, to these people were from different organizations, institutions, and companies. What is the result of the project? In the effect of discussion, we selected 6 SDGs on which we decided that business has the highest influence, and this is the initial choice. To this to these SDGs, we proposed 30 indicators, which each company that wants to join the project may calculate by its own and using its own source of information. The barometer has the form of the Excel file, which contains the description of indicators, the methodological explanations, guidance for use, and the formulas for calculation. For calculation, there are used microdata, and the results are also microinformation, and they are treated by the CSR Consulting and the Statistics Poland as confidential data. But basing on this information, CSR Consulting is to calculate the aggregates that will give the overall picture of engagement of Polish business in SDGs, and this aggregate may be also used by individual companies for benchmarking and for comparisons with the market average. How it looks like in practice. First, the company that is willing to take part in the project to report reports its readiness to CSR Consulting, and it gets the impact barometer, the Excel file. It uses this Excel file to calculate the indicators, and the results are sent back to CSR Consulting, which is going to calculate the aggregates and to make more advanced analysis. But each company may decide by its own to publish the results, to share it with the public, and to publish them or in a corporate report or on the website. What is most important, these results should be used by the company to analyze its situation, to identify weak and strong sides, to evaluate undertaken action, and to plan the future steps. It's supposed to repeat the monitoring every year. The barometer was published at the end of the last year, and this year it was supposed to collect the results from the first companies that want to join our idea. But as everybody knows, the situation strongly changed, and nowadays the companies are struggling with really serious problems. So probably we will have to revise our plans for the near future. The barometer provides the data which are not official, and they are not in line with official rules of quality for official statistics. But even though we decided to publish the information about the barometer on our website as national reporting platform, because we decided that it's useful information, and even if these data are not equal to the official ones, they may be complementary to them and may be used for wider and deeper analysis of the engagement of Polish society, economy in SDGs. To finish my presentation, I would like to underline that this experience was very unusual and very enriching for all sides, but I think the most for statistics. It was the unique opportunity to meet face-to-face our data users and data providers, to understand the mutual needs, concerns, points of view. We see that in the effect, we are more aware of the point of view of business. We understand better their needs, which are not usual and typical. On the other side, we see also that the awareness of usefulness of statistics, not necessarily official, also increased among business. The proof is the big interest in impact barometer that we can see after this time that the barometer was launched. And we see this interest also in a number of invitations that we get to take part in further initiatives and projects. And we are invited not only to share our statistical data, statistical production and results of our survey, but we are also invited to share our statistical knowledge. And I think that it's really important conclusion from this project that we realized, it was surprising, at least for me, that our value, the value of statistics, is not only the product, the figure, the numbers, it's also our know-how, our knowledge, long tradition, how to approach to statistics, how to approach and conduct the process of production of these statistics, of communication, understanding, and use it in practice. And I see that this knowledge is also applicable not only in official statistics, but also in other kinds of information, as this project shows. So I think that to finish, it's good to remember while preparing communication plans and strategies to take into consideration, including in these plans, sharing the knowledge, communicating not only data, but also promoting our statistical knowledge. So this is everything from my side. If you would like to know more details about Impact Barometer, I would like to encourage you to read the paper which is attached to this presentation. And of course, I'm also ready to answer the question if any arise. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Magda. That was really interesting. You can share your video now so that we can see you. If anyone has any questions, could they add them in the chat function? If not, I have some questions from things that were previously submitted. I think it's really interesting what you're saying about sharing your knowledge, not just the data. I think you need to be careful or you'll be inundated with requests to help out. How can I ask how you went about choosing to work with this consulting company? Were there any criteria that you felt they had to meet? You know, how did you decide to go ahead with this? Because it is quite an unusual partnership. I think you're still on mute.
Really? I admit that we should be careful choosing partners that we cooperate with, because we also may, of course, we always may be accused on not being objective. Mm-hmm. But I think that this idea, this partner, is worth of attention, and this initiative is really gathering the partners from all sides. So, and the most important thing that it's done everything under the honor patronage of the ministry. So I think that this project also shows how the partnership may be strong, and how the partnership may also be this basis on which we decide whether to join the action or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. So we've had a question and some support for what you're doing. Cara from Canada saying about how she agrees the data stewardship role that you've taken on is a good one, an interesting approach. And she's wondering, was there ever an instance in this work where you had to note the data wasn't appropriate to present?
Actually, we do not have any data at the moment, because this is time when the companies are just filling this file. So the action also slowed down because of the current crisis. But we are very aware we will be aware publishing these results of the fact that they are not official. So we decided that we will support calculations of aggregate and publishing the report, but we will be not the main actor, we will be not the main author. This is everything on the side of the PSR consulting, and it takes its responsibility. We just will support with our knowledge and our experience, statistical. But also we heard from the TSR consulting that they already have appeared some signals from the companies that they will not share their information to the public because some of them are very delicate. They concern, for example, salaries and inequality. But we still think that such kind of a knowledge is very important for the management company.
Yes.
So still, we think that it will be useful and used in practice.
Yes, it is very interesting, and this is what we want: is people to be using data to make decisions on their businesses, and this idea of working in partnership as well, very much in the spirit of SDGs. I don't think we have any more questions, and there were questions submitted earlier, ahead of the meeting, not so much about this initiative, but I wonder, I don't know if you'd be able to answer perhaps. So one question we had from UNICEF was about how national administrative data can be used for monitoring nationally SDG indicators. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think they've got a great potential and never ending, I think. But I think that it depends on the country and the individual approach.
Yes.
I think that every country, every statistical office struggles with its own problems regarding this topic. I see that this source of information is still more and more popular and more used. From our point of view, from Statistics Poland's point of view, these data have the great potential, but sometimes it's very difficult to get them from the gestors. This is the one obstacle, and the second big obstacle is the comparability with our concept definition. So I think this is the great potential, but the use of this data is not so easy and requires from us a really careful approach and a lot of work.
I agree, actually. I think it's one of those things, and people talk about big data in the same way as sort of, all this data, but it's not. And that's what you were saying about the Statistics Office has this know-how to say, well, it's not quite that simple. Yes, no, really interesting. We haven't had any further questions, so I'm going to move on to Petra. Thank you very much, Magda. I'm sure we'll come back to you at the end of the session and see if you have any last words. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joe, everyone.
See you later. Petra, how are you feeling? Are you ready to share your screen?
Yes. Yes. Okay. I will try to share my screen now. Can you see that, please?
Excellent. Yes, we can see that.
Okay, great.
Go ahead then. Thank you, Petra.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Tina and Stella for organizing this series of webinars. I was really disappointed when I heard that we cannot meet physically in Budapest, but I think that this is a great opportunity to meet at least virtually and share our experience on SDG monitoring. And I would also like to thank Joe and Natalia for putting this session together. So good job, and okay, I will continue with my presentation. So I would like to share experience from us as an international agency on how we can use our data to develop tools on assessing progress on industry-related targets of Goal 9 of the 2030 Agenda. We at UNIDO Statistics Division, we collect data from national statistical offices to allow the SDG monitoring of SDG 9 targets and indicators. And from that national data that we collect, we also compile regional and global aggregates. All of this data are then available either in the SDG global database available on the UNSD website, or also on the UNIDO SDG 9 data platform. We publish also a thematic report on inclusive and sustainable industrial development. This is a report which is published on a biennial basis, and we would like to publish a next one at the end of 2020 or beginning 2021. And actually, we would like to include also these tools that I'm going to present here to be part of this report. And of course, we are in touch with NSOs, and we are providing them technical assistance and trying to increase the data coverage and to improve the data collection processes. So UNIDO is a custodian agency of 6 indicators under
Petra?
4. Yes?
Sorry, your screen, have you stopped sharing your content?
No, I'm still sharing that.
Oh.
Something happened. I can see now.
I don't know if anyone else can see. I can't see your presentation.
No, I think it just stopped. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Can
thanks.
you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Great. So UNIDO is a custodian agency of 6 indicators under 4 targets of the Goal 9, and they cover various dimensions on like a economic dimension, also like the inclusion of manufacturing production, and also the energy efficiency of manufacturing sectors. That's why also the data sources used for producing the data and also allowing the monitoring come from various national sources, like annual national accounts, labor force surveys, energy consumption data, and also the biggest part comes from industrial surveys or economic censuses coming from countries. So let me start with the tools we developed while using the data that we collected. And I would like to present here 3 examples. So our first example is, we call it the SDG 9 index, but it's a tool which serves as a tracking performance of industry-related indicators. So due to the data availability, it captures only 5 indicators out of the 7 what we have. And the data coverage is then 128 economies over the time frame 2000-2017. And based on this index, the top 5 ranked countries in 2017 are Ireland, the Taiwan province of China, Switzerland, Germany, and Republic of Korea. Of course, we don't think that it's not only about ranking, so it's more like an invitation for the data users to explore the dimensions of the index and to show in which dimensions, in this case, in which indicators, countries lag behind and maybe can put much more effort into improving the performance. So here I put a simple radar chart to see how this tool can be, for example, used, where the indicators are standardized between 0 and 1, and the countries can simply compare their performance on the global level. We also can use this index to communicate the global performance, meaning how countries progress towards inclusive and sustainable industrial development. And I put it here not because of splitting countries into different categories, but also showing that it can highlight that there are areas where we have no data, and that's why we don't include these countries in construction of the index. And this is exactly calling for more statistical capacity building, especially in Africa, as we can see that the missing data are mostly there. So this is also a tool on communicating issue of lack of industrial data in the world. So the next challenge or next question coming very often to us is like, okay, there is one of our targets, which is SDG 9.2, identifies a clear target on doubling industry share of employment and gross domestic product in least developed countries. And a lot of people are asking, so what are the prospects of LDCs to reach the SDG 9 target 9.2? There has been one assessment conducted by UNSD. It's called SDG Progress Chart, and it was also part of the SDG report published last year. But here we can see that when we have a look, all the results we have here are red or orange, which tells us that these countries or regions are moving away from the target, or they have limited or no progress. And this is not a message what we want to send. So we've been thinking about how we can communicate this and to adjust the methodologies we have developed. So when we talk about manufacturing in LDCs, then we can see our baseline scenario. And on the left side, you can see manufacturing value added as a share of GDP, which is mentioned in the target. And here you can see the solid line corresponding to all LDCs that it's actually stagnating kind of in the last 20 years. So it would be quite difficult to double the share in LDCs with this current progress done since 1995 as depicted in this picture. But we can also see that there are two diverging groups, and that's why also the disaggregation of data is very important, because we can see that the trends for African and Asian Pacific LDCs is quite different. But on the other hand, when we look on the manufacturing value added as an absolute value, which is on the right side, we can see that all the values for all regions and LDCs and aggregated group, they are growing significantly. So the question is, like, what are the drivers to improve the chance of achieving this target? So we conducted a little research study identifying driving factors of industrialization coming from already previous research. And we found that there are a lot of aspects that can be considered, like investment, state of industrial development, economic and political stability indicators, and also other social aspects. But unfortunately for our model, we decided to select only economic variables, which is investment represented by foreign direct investments for capita, and also gross domestic savings, and then interest payments on foreign debts. This was all done because of data availability in least developed countries, and also some other issues with data aggregation, and also the relevancy of these indicators for this region. But we found out, according to our model, that the foreign direct investments have positive impact on MVA, the same for gross domestic savings. And on the other hand, the negative impact was identified for interest payments on external debt. And here is the result. It's quite difficult to do projections of this kind because we have limited data how we can actually predict what will happen until 2030. But we can see that if we take all LDCs together, that actually we need to accelerate the process when we assume the current indicators and current variables progressing at the same pace. But we also wanted to look on these two different groups within LDCs, African and Asian LDCs. So we can see that then actually the target value is completely different when we're considering doubling 2015 value, and also the prospects differ significantly for both groups. So we started to think about that maybe when we tried this example or this exercise on LDCs, it would be interesting to have something also for countries on the country level, but clearly developing models country by country, indicator by indicator would be very time consuming, and we don't really have capacity to do that. But we are now, this is a work in progress, we are developing a so-called SDG 9 tracker, which will be an online interactive tool to help not only to our member states, but also to the broader public, tracking the progress on SDG 9 industry-related targets and indicators. This tracker will be placed as a component of the existing UNIDOS industrial analytics platform, where you can already explore industrial trends in actually quite a number of countries. But we would like to include there also SDG 9 country profiles to allow users compare countries' performance and benchmark not only countries, but also like to see the results like within the region, and to indicate countries' progress if they are on track to achieve corresponding SDG 9 targets represented by these indicators. So the methodology is being developed together with a support from UNESCAP. I really have to thank UNESCAP for sharing all the materials with us and helping us to adjust the methodology for our needs on applying this on our indicators. So I would like to show you two examples which are currently what we have already put together. And we have two measures here. When one is called current status index, and the second one is, we call it achievement likelihood. The current status index should answer the question how much progress has been made since 2000, and the achievement likelihood is posing a question how likely will the target be achieved by 2030. The biggest challenge for us was to set up target values, because none of the SDG 9 indicators or targets have a clear specification of the targets. Like, we are left with very relative calls like significantly increase or significantly reduce. So we decided to set up these target values based on statistical evidence and by using a data-driven approach. So we decided to set the target values with respect to benchmark groups, and here you can see that we are using M49 regions. So if I refer to this example of Kyrgyzstan, we have assessment within the Central Asia and Southern Asia region. The target value is set up when we eliminate, of course, all the outliers in the region, that we take the top 3 average growth rates and we apply them on the country data. On the left side, you can see the current status index, which classifies the data between -1 and 1. And you can see that there a dotted line, which represents the current target calculated with this method. 3 of these indicators, in this case, MVA share, MVA per capita, and medium and high-tech industry share, are taking the opposite direction than is indicated by the target. And 2 indicators are actually on a good path, and we can even see that CO2 intensity of manufacturing industries has already achieved the current target when we apply this methodology. And on the right side, you can see achievement likelihood, which takes values between 0 and 1. And this is calculated based on the current progress done by the country. And we can also see that employment is on track to reach target or little additional growth is necessary, which is indicated by this line close to this green and yellow, let's say, chart. And this is same for CO2 intensity. But we can also see that MBA share, MBA per capita, and medium and high-tech industry share needs to reverse the negative trends to achieve the target. So this was just an example. We are still working on it, and we are thinking about how to communicate this and maybe even changing the way how it's visualized to not to send any like negative messages to member states. But what are the ways towards better SDG 9 monitoring? We still have a lot of work ahead, like strengthening partnerships with NSOs in data collection, because there is still a lot what can be done, as my example for African countries. Also, we would like to support our member states to improve monitoring the SDG target 9.3 on small-scale industrial enterprises, where there is also a lack of data. And we can provide our methodological guidance, and also we should be able to provide the technical cooperation services. And we would also like to develop some e-learning materials to support countries on data collection, analysis, and also reporting for these indicators. And the last point, what I listed here, is that everything what I have presented is what was before the COVID pandemic. So the question is, what will happen after that? Like, there is a high level of uncertainty right now. So either in data production, data collection and production, and also like what will happen to our achieving SDG targets, because we don't know in which direction or how much countries will be affected by the situation. Thank you very much for your attention. I would welcome any questions and to start in the discussion.
Thank you, Petra. Are you able to share your video so we can see you?
Yes.
Thank you. There were a couple of questions while you were talking. I think you may have answered the part about assuming target values, but people were really interested in how you calculated or how you constructed the index, particularly on the weightings. Are you able to say more to that?
Yes, of course. Let's just, can I see this question?
Yeah, can you see the chat bit?
Yeah, okay.
So if you scroll up, the Claire asked something there.
Okay, okay. I can see there a question on how the index is calculated. I think that this is a question coming to the SDG 9 index in general.
Yeah.
And we were taking simply the equal weights. We played a lot with that, but at the end we decided that the message we want to send, it should be very easy to read by any user without any knowledge of statistics. So making it complicated, it would be difficult to communicate what we want to really say. So that's why we kept it with equal weights, very simple.
Mm-hmm. And have you been, I'm sorry if you did, but you used some country data. Have you been working with NSOs on developing this? Have you had any feedback yet, or is it still early stages?
It's still an early stage. Like, we produced this index based on the data what we collected. So everything comes from the SDG global database. There is nothing more. And yeah, we published even a paper in a research journal. So it's kind of like appreciation from the global research community that it was built in the right way. But of course, any feedback what can be provided is highly welcome.
Excellent. Does anyone else have any more questions? I don't know. No one's typing yet. So I'm not going to put you on the spot. You mentioned COVID. We're just going to have to wait and see, aren't we? The long-term impact, because there's obviously going to be interruption to data collection as well as changes to economies and unusual times. Well, thank you very much, Petra, for sharing your presentation with us. I'm going to, unless there's, oh, we've got one. Cara has pointed out at one point the IAEG was looking at overall goal indicators because the mandate was to develop indicators for the targets and goals. So perhaps UNIDO should present this to the IAEG.
Yeah, it would be a pleasure, Cara. No, it's like even the progress methodology, it's been very fresh, like even for us. I didn't assume that we would get funding to go a bit further with this methodology. So I'm really happy to share the knowledge, and I'll continue even to work on it further with others.
Yeah, lovely. Oh, thank you very much. So Simon, Blay, so we're actually using a similar approach to rank goals in the EU SDG report. Okay. It's really interesting to see how different people are approaching it. And obviously our task team is about communicating SDGs, so we're really keen to see initiatives like this. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass over to Natalia, who's going to introduce Guillaume. I'm not so good with the names and the pronunciations. But thank you, Petra. And again, we may come back to you at the end with some questions if there's discussions.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah,
thank you. Bye. Natalia, are you ready to sort of show your video? Hello. I can't hear you.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to hand the reins over to you now, Natalia.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Let's continue our interesting discussion, and I guess each of us, at least once, had an idea to find out who are these people who publish the SDG index report, and how the report is prepared, how indicators and analysis methods are selected, and so on. And today we have a good opportunity to ask all these questions to Guillaume Lafortune, the coordinator of the SDSN Sustainable Development Report. Please write your questions to the chat, and Guillaume, we are glad to see you among our speakers, and the floor is yours. Can you share your presentation now?
Sure, I'm sharing my screen now. Good afternoon or morning, everyone. My presentation should be uploaded now, and I will put it in the Barometer. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see.
Great. So thank you very much for inviting me today. I was actually thinking about this. I don't think I've joined any of the UNICE meetings in the past, so it's a real pleasure to be here and to meet all of you virtually, at least. So I will share the work. I will share insights on the work that we do in the SDSN, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, to track the Sustainable Development Goals. I'll say a few words on the methodology, but I'll also share some ways we have used the results and the data to work with partners, including governments, but also multilateral organization and the private sector as well. So I will start by providing a little bit of an overview on this SDG index and dashboards and the methodology. I'll share a few results on the European edition that we launched last November, and then I'll discuss some of the process and the impacts that we've had in the past. Just to say up front that our next global edition will come out in June this year, with a strong focus obviously on COVID, but also on taking stock of the progress that we see now that we are 5 years into the SDGs. And our next EU report will come out next November, also with a strong focus on COVID-19. So the broad objective of this work is both to be an accountability tool, so to obviously highlight where are the strengths and weaknesses of countries and establish the SDGs as a useful tool for policy action. So we track performance of all 193 UN member states. I should say up front that this is not an official report. So the SDSN is mandated by the UN Secretary General since 2012 to mobilize knowledge and research around the Sustainable Development Goals, but we're not part of the UN Secretariat. So this is outside of the official UN reporting, and this is very much complementary to the work that the IAEG is doing on standardizing indicators. Now, obviously, and I mean, I've worked for many years before joining the SDSN at the OECD. Standardizing official statistics takes time, especially when we start from scratch. And so what this non-official report does is to say, look, let's use official data when we have official data to track the SDGs. When we don't have, let's use the best available data from non-official data sources, so that it can include, obviously, our expert of more than 1,200 partner institutions around the world, mainly in universities, research centers, but also from NGOs and civil society organizations. So in our report, in our global report, we have about 2/3 of official statistics, so that come from the UN, the World Bank, the ILO, WHO, UNESCO, etc. And 1/3 of the data that we use comes from non-official statistics, and that includes, again, data from research centers, universities, and NGOs. So it's an accountability tool, but it's also a way for us to support the global efforts to strengthen data availability. And as it was mentioned in the previous presentation, what's also interesting in all these reports is also to look at the gray, at the information that is in gray, which usually means that we are missing information. So this shows you various editions of the report that we've done. So we started with a global edition in 2016. We produced this report in collaboration with the Bertelsmann Stiftung on an annual basis. So that's the global edition. But then obviously, I mean, what we can do in the global, we are constrained in the global edition by the data availability in countries with relatively low data available, because obviously we want to compare as much as possible countries based on a similar basket of indicators. And so there's quite a lot of constraints when we work at the global level. So for that reason, we've started working also at the continental level or the regional level. For two reasons. One is that we're able to contextualize a little bit more their narrative sections, obviously, of these reports, but also the indicator selection to really specific SDG issues that regions might be facing, but also because it allows us to tap into much more data that's available at the regional level. So here I'm taking the example of the European report. It's in the European reports. We are obviously lucky to be able to use the absolutely outstanding information available for Europe from Eurostat services, but also other services from the European Commission, including the European Environmental Agency, the Joint Research Center, and others. So we do also these regional editions. We've done for Africa. We're doing also editions for the Arab region, and obviously for Europe, as I mentioned. We're going to launch also an edition for Latin America soon. And then in addition to this, I mean, obviously when we were doing these reports, we got the comment that, look, I mean, one data point per country is good, but at the same time, it might hide disparities within countries. And cities and municipalities are obviously very important for the goal. So we've also started tracking what's happening at the subnational level. So we've done here reports for US, Spain, Italy. I think actually some of the authors of the Italian reports are on this webinar, so that's great. And then we've also done reports for European cities. We're working with many Latin American countries also on subnational reports. And these are very useful for local policymakers also to translate the goals into concrete metrics and indicators at the subnational level. So this is broadly speaking how we present our results. So I've taken this is completely a random country, and this is for Paraguay here. So we present an overall SDG performance with an average score for the region, a quadrant chart with the distance to each target, and then we have dashboards. So both, let's say, a static dashboard, the current assessment of the distance to the target, and we also include assessments of trends over time. The assessment of trend is made by looking at the past year's annual growth rate for specific indicators, and then extrapolating the annual growth rate into the future and seeing whether by 2030 this would allow the country to reach a target that is predefined. What I should say also on the static dashboard is that the way we do this is a harsh grading approach. So here in this dashboard, we focus on the two worst indicators within a goal. So we really want to call attention on goals where there is a lot of where there might be very important issues. And this allows us also to deal with the issue of what in statistics would be called substitutability or compensation. So here, good performance on 5 out of 7 indicators will not compensate for poor performance in 2 indicators. And this is where we deal with the compensation. So we don't deal with compensation in the creation of the index score, but we deal with it in the creation of the dashboard here. We also present, obviously, very detailed results including at the level of specific indicators. So just to summarize, I think there's 5 fundamental assumptions that we make when we do this exercise. One is that we think that the SDGs require, in order to track the SDGs, we need to estimate the distance to invariant sustainable development targets. And so for this reasons, we do set targets for each indicators. Our scores are denominated on a scale from 0 to 100. But we think this is absolutely necessary. The absence of targets means that even if you want to track progress over time, you would not be able to say whether a small progress, to differentiate between a small progress and a very significant progress if you don't have a target value set into the future. So this is our approach. I know, this is something that many organizations have different views on this. We obviously have the freedom in the SDSN to do this. And I will say a word about how we do this, involving also our network of experts. But we have a decision tree which looks quite similar actually to the decision tree that the OECD is using in their distance to target assessment. The second major assumption is that non-official data help bridging data gaps. So this, I've mentioned that. There's two ways we feel it can help bridge data gaps in official statistics. One is obviously when we don't have any data, and here I'm thinking around issues related to global data on biodiversity. We do have measures of protected areas, but when it comes to actually measuring the impact on oceans, corals, or unsustainable fisheries, we don't necessarily always have very good global metrics for that, but there is non-official data that exists and that we leverage for that. Including, for instance, from a project called the Sea Around Us project. So we do use non-official data when we're missing data. We also use it when we feel that there might be, let's say, biases in the official measures. So for instance, our measure of Gini in our report is adjusted for missing top income. So this is based on research done by the Brookings Institution, which shows that budget surveys do not do a great job at capturing the top 1%. There's a discrepancy in income reported between budget and the SNA, and they attribute half of this discrepancy to missing top income. So we adjust Gini for missing top income in budget and household survey, and so that's why our Gini measure is slightly different from what you get from the World Bank, for instance. Our number of indicators evolves over time. I think that's one of the really positive things about the SDGs, that it has pushed the whole community working on data and statistics to think outside of our usual boundaries. There's new indicators that come out every year, so we feel it would be a pity not to use them, even though it means that comparability over time is affected here. And we do not recluster the goal. So, the 5 Ps, the social, economic, environmental, governance, we do not recluster the goal. We use the 17 SDGs as the final framework. And when we have the choice between different methodologies or approaches, we obviously do sensitivity tests, but we usually go for the approach which is the easier to understand. So we had, for instance, a big debate on geometric mean versus arithmetic mean for aggregating our results. We did a sensitivity test, which is presented in a 2017 edition. We showed that overall it did not have such major impacts. So we went for arithmetic mean, but we also published sensitivity tests. We've also done on weighting, Monte Carlo simulations, and others. But generally speaking, that's just our general rule. We try to be accessible as much as possible to a wide audience. And this is connecting very well to what was said early on, is that if it becomes very difficult to explain your results to an audience, then the numbers, the statistics may not be that helpful. And this is really the flagship report of the SDSN. Moving on, so just on how we set the thresholds. So we have a decision tree. There's 5 elements here. So obviously when the SDGs have a target, this is what we use. When there's no explicit target, we use some of the big principles of the SDGs. So leave no one behind, for instance. So we set the thresholds on zero deprivation of universal access. We use science-based targets or expert judgments to set some of the targets. So we have an indicator on the yield gaps, a measure of agricultural efficiency. And here there is evidence that a yield gap closure at 80%, for instance, is an acceptable threshold. And there is peer-reviewed literature on this. So this is what we use. And then when many countries already exceed the SDG target, we use the average of top 5 performers. This is a very rare case, but on child mortality, some countries already exceed it, and we want to reward countries' performance through the entire scale. So we actually go beyond what the SDGs ask for. And then for all of other indicators, it's the average of the top 5 performers. So for more detailed information, I went very quickly on the methodology, but we have a detailed methodology paper. We have been audited statistically by the European Commission Joint Research Center. We use extensively the handbook, obviously, on constructing composite indicators, and our methodology and results have been published also in Nature peer-reviewed journal. So just a few words on the European edition, for instance. So we have released this last November. It was the first European edition. We have a report. We also have a data platform where you can actually interact with the data, but also access directly each of the databases. As for all of our reports, we present a distance to target, so a current, a static assessment, but also an assessment of trends over time. And all of this is obviously available on our website. So for the EU, one of our big messages was that there's issues related to SDG 2 on obesity, but also sustainable agriculture. SDG 9 and 10. So SDG 9 on the convergence process and covering industry, innovation, and infrastructure. So this is one of the goals where we saw the largest spread in performance across countries. SDG 10 also on income inequalities, also lots of issues. And then SDG 12 to 15, problems on the domestic performance, but also on impacts that the EU is generating abroad through consumption, what we call spillover effects. And here this comes primarily from outside of official statistics as well. So here we work with multi-regional input-output table, and we collaborate with experts all around the world to track the impacts that are embodied into people consumption through trade. So it's one thing to decarbonize domestically, but if this is achieved by outsourcing cement and steel to another country and re-importing the production, in an SDG world, this is no longer tolerable. And we have the econometrics tool now to track how much countries are outsourcing environmental impacts, biodiversity impacts, but also social impacts on other countries. And this is also why, this is also part of the reason why the EU here does very poorly on SDG 12 to 15. So what we've done also is to, in addition to having indicators like life expectancy or education outcome, we've also integrated what we call gap measures. So for instance, the gap in life expectancy by income, or gap in self-reported health between rural, urban, and all sorts of metrics related to equity in education, health, but also in access to technology and safety across specific population groups. So we call it the Leave No One Behind Index. and we've aggregated this. We had 4 main dimensions on poverty and material deprivation, income inequalities, access to equality of services for all, and gender inequalities. And this is basically our measure of within country inequalities. We've also done what we call a negative international spillovers index. So this is what I was mentioning, impacts that are generated through EU's action to other countries. So here we usually cluster them in, let's say, 4 main categories. So some of them are more economic or financial. So this can be tax evasion, profit shifting, financial secrecy. And here we use a lot of the information collected by Oxfam, for instance, or the Tax Justice Network, so also outside of official statistics. We also track social spillovers, so accidents at work that are generated through EU's imports. And we're digging right now actually for a separate project on the textile supply chain, so the impacts that the EU is generating through the imports of textile on primarily Southeast Asia. Environmental impacts, so how much CO2 emissions, SO2, nitrogen emissions can be attributed to the EU through imports, and also security, so the trade in conventional weapons, and this is also coming from outside of official statistics. So just a few words quickly on the process and the impact. So this work has benefited from years of consultation. I mean, we do annually a consultation for the global report. We do consultations, public consultations and targeted consultations to our networks for every report. So overall, we have received thousands of comments. On the methodology, the indicator selection for the global report, I think we've really left no stones unturned, and we've digged into into at least a lot of options, and this has been documented in many of our reports. We rely extensively on our SDSN experts and networks. We have conducted independent statistical audit. We have also published in the peer-reviewed literature. So we have taken steps to make sure that we get external opinions on the approach. For the European edition specifically, we collaborated with the IEEP, the Institute for European Environmental Policy, the Think 2030 group, the European Economic and Social Committee, but also numerous services from the European Commission, so including Eurostat, the EEA, and the JRC as well. And all our data, all our material is accessible for free on our website, so anyone can reproduce our results and get access to our data. On impact and reuse, this is really our report, which is meant to, which targets a very wide audience, and this is why also rankings are useful, because they are really the entry points to the report. So we've done a quick check actually last year, and when we look at media coverage, our estimate is that if we remove the overall SDG index ranking and score, we would lose probably around 70 to 80% of media coverage when we launch reports. So rankings are useful to get the attention and get people to enter into the report, but obviously the interesting results are really into the indicators and the more detailed assessments that you get into the country profiles. We know we've been used extensively in the voluntary national review process as well. We try to help as much as possible when there are requests and feedback from government units, so both from more policy-oriented government teams, but also from statistical teams and NSOs within the government. When we launched, for instance, the European edition, we had a very great conversation at the parliamentary meeting in Denmark. So we also try to see how we can make sense of these data for policymakers and lawmakers. I think we have. We have tried to really streamline this issue of consumption-based accounting. So this is what, when Greta Thunberg speaks about creative carbon accounting, well, that's the fact that we usually focus on the production side without taking into account the impacts that we have through consumption. Obviously, there's lots of reasons for focusing on the production side, but I think the consumption-based accounting is also very interesting, and over time, the measures and the calculations that researchers are able to provide become more and more robust over the years. So we're really working closely with some of the top experts on that front. We've also done a lot of work to localize the SDGs. So working with, and that's why I mentioned the reports that we do at the city and local level. So to translate those goals that were meant to apply mainly at the national level to the local level and to local policymakers. And we've had this was a surprise to me, but we have quite a lot of engagement with the private sector and the financial sector that want to use it as a tool to inform investment decisions. So a lot of time it's to inform sovereign investment decisions. Obviously, the report was not made directly to inform investments. It does not replace, obviously, a thorough analysis of countries' strategies and the balance sheet. But we know that a number of banks, insurance companies, asset owners, and other financial institutions have used the report. What they have done with the report is not always publicly available, so we don't always know what happens with our data, but we do get frequently requests to actually support or clarify data questions related to this SDG index, and we've also worked with some multilateral banks, including those that focus a lot on infrastructure investment, and we have developed an infrastructure investment toolkit based also on distance to target for the SDGs that depend the most on infrastructure. And then we've also seen lots of reuse in the literature, the academic literature of our work, and different tests and comparisons being made as well. Just with the private sector, we obviously also work at the corporate level. So this is a little bit separate from the SDG index in the sense that we do work with organizations like the World Business Council on Sustainable Development and the World Benchmarking Alliance to see how to translate the SDG metrics into metrics that make sense at the business level. So we're obviously big fans of the work of the World Benchmarking Alliance and those sectoral benchmarks that they have done for the automobile industry and for other industries. I think this is really promising, and so we work with private sector organizations as well. I think this is all for me. Thank you very much again for inviting me, and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Guillaume, very much. Very interesting presentation. You're very popular, and SDG Index is popular too. So we have several questions from the chat, and we received several questions before the meeting. So let's start with the chat, and we have the question about COVID effects. Maybe a few more words about COVID effect in your future thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question.
And please turn on your video. Thank you.
Oops, sorry. Turn on my video. Not sure where. Can you still hear me? Yeah. One second.
No.
Oops.
But we would like to see you.
Yeah, sure. Let me see if I can turn on my video here. I just can't see the.
But probably you should first, Guillaume, stop sharing. And then
Oh, yes, exactly. Yeah, sorry. Stop sharing, yeah. Okay, that should be fine. Okay, sorry about this. There's so many of those platforms that I get confused between Zoom, GoToMeeting, WebEx, and all those others. COVID-19. It's a tricky one because there's so much uncertainties still. So if I want to stay very close to my organization, let's say, what I should say is that we haven't released anything publicly yet, a formal statement on what do we think COVID-19 will have in terms of impact on the SDGs. There's obviously some qualitative work that was done by UNDESA. I think they released a very nice visual about this. But I think overall, I think we have to acknowledge that there's lots of uncertainties. And I think the IMF, when the IMF released their World Economic Outlook and their projection, they basically said that a lot of the forecasts are clouded by uncertainty, both on the epidemiological side, I mean, we don't know the seasonality still of the virus exactly. We don't know when vaccines and treatments will arrive. We don't know how badly Africa and other parts of the world will be affected. We don't know about the second wave. We don't know also whether the data and statistics are reliable. So I think it's very difficult, at least on a quantitative standpoint, to come up with any forecast of how it will impact the SDGs. But I think broadly speaking, from our side, is that before COVID, the world was not on track. I mean, we were making good progress in certain areas, but the world was not on track to achieve the SDGs. Probably in the short run, it will have many negative impacts on the SDGs. And I'm thinking on a lot of the socio-economic ones, but even on the environmental ones. I mean, we don't know what will happen to environmental law enforcement, and whether during the recovery the SDGs will continue to be a framework that will be used to inform recovery plans and investment plans. Obviously, saving jobs is an absolute necessity, but if this can be achieved without completely killing all the efforts that were done over the past couple of years, I think this would be better. But I think that's all I can say at this stage. We will release a thought piece in June on our side on this. We have also done a survey of the SDG community on the issue, so trying to collect some opinions and some views on what people think will be the impact. So all of this we will release in June, but for now that's all I can say.
Thank you so much. And we have another question from Övünç Ünsal from Turkish Statistical Office, and I think this could be a question from all statisticians. How do you collaborate with national statistical offices? For example, if there is a contact point or setting that NSO and SDSN can get together, discuss data quality issues, and can collaborate on reporting capacities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we work quite closely with NSOs. We send the report quite widely, including to UNSD, when we prepare the reports every year. So we also send it obviously to all UN missions. So we work quite closely with NSOs. Now the reality is that we use the information that we use is information that's already published somewhere, right? So we don't clean the data ourselves. We don't have the capacity to clean the data ourselves. So we rely on data that's available in the World Bank database, the ILO, the WHO, the UNESCO, all the UN custodian agencies for the global report at least. For the EU report, we rely extensively on Eurostat's processes. And we're always obviously keen to provide clarification on the data and to specific questions that might arise. But usually we also redirect NSOs to the actual collectors of the underlying data. What we cannot do for obvious reasons is to actually integrate national estimates within our report. So this is something that comes up every year when we do this, is that when a country sees the data point missing, they say, look, I have this very great national estimate, can you use this instead of the missing data point? And again, in SDSN, we do not have the capacity to say whether this data point is comparable or not. These are the processes that exist in the UN custodian agencies, in the European institutions, and other organizations. So this is something we simply don't do. We never accept a submission of national estimates if it did not go through a proper process of data cleaning and validation. I hope this answers the question.
Thank you so much. And we have the similar questions. Do you use SDG national statistical indicators framework? We understood no. And consultation with NSOs. And what happens when data is different from the NSOs published? We understood. COVID effect. And we have one question received in advance. Colombia asked how to guarantee and promote the use of SDG statistics in society. Can you ask?
In society. Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting question, and I mean, I'd be happy also to hear the views of all the panelists on all of these questions. I think again, the great thing I think about the SDGs, especially if we compare to the MDGs, is that efforts to improve the measurement has started much earlier, actually. And I mean, during the MDGs, we obviously saw great progress in data available in healthcare, in education, and others. But the work on data and statistics started a little bit later. Now with the SDGs, I think from the start, the number of initiatives that picked up and that were started to try and improve the measurement and the quality of the data that we have is just completely outstanding. And to me, this is already one of the usefulness of having these goals, is that we are working with a similar framework and we're all pushing and say, look, we need to improve the quality of the data to capture all those different dimensions. And I think as part of that, I think there's also lots of very innovative initiatives, including in trying to use big data, collaborations with the private sector, collaborations with researchers, so the whole science policy interface, and also satellite imagery, sensor data, telecoms data. So I think overall, all these efforts are all very positive, and I think that's already one of the impacts of the SDGs. And I think the fact that we have one SDG index and dashboards, that we have UNDESA also that released a monitoring report, that Eurostat also has a distance to target or an SDG report, that the OECD has a report also, just means that we have really many processes in all organizations that are really helping to improve data availability on the SDGs. So I think this is all really positive. And then how to communicate these results. I mean, I think the bottom line is that we should communicate this obviously to policy makers. I think something like an SDG index dashboard can be accessed quite easily also by layman users, the general population. So this is why this is the report where we have lots of media coverage. We try to go beyond the debate, ranking versus non-ranking. I mean, for us, it's really an entry point to the rest of the report. But so yeah, just to try to communicate our results as much as possible, make it accessible as much as possible, and use also data visualization tools for the outreach as much as possible, because people don't necessarily read reports anymore, and so we put a lot of emphasis also here on how can we make our data easy to visualize, and even using gaming and other tools to make the data very accessible as much as possible.
Thank you, Guillaume. And we have another question from UNICEF Stat. There are two directly relevant SDG indicators, 1.5.1, number of deaths, missing persons, and directly affected persons attributed to disasters per 100,000 population, and the second one, 1.5.2, direct economic loss attributed to disasters in relation to global gross domestic products, GDP. Attention is on the crisis, and less resources can be devoted to everything else. At the same time, SDGs remain relevant and data are needed. Even more data, as in each area people will be asking about the effect of the pandemic.
I think Tina was just trying to answer some of the people's questions on COVID, but I think there are more questions further down.
Can we, Joanna? Yes, Joanne was right. I was just, because there were questions about what is the effect of this COVID also on the NSO work in producing data for SDGs. So this is a long area where you can discuss a lot, but I was just trying to give a very short kind of answer just to what directions to point to. But then there was still a question now from Anne to Guillaume about the user research information in the public domain on how you developed your visualizations.
to show measures of progress.
User
So how did you arrive at the visuals you currently have, and what else was tried?
So if this is about the country profiles, I think we wanted to have something that was obviously quick to understand, to grasp. And I think we wanted to deal quite quickly with this issue of compensation substitutability. So on one side, we obviously have a rather easy and quick to understand method for generating scores using arithmetic mean and using all the indicators. But then we felt this was actually hiding, in some cases, a bad performance in very important aspects. So this is how we came up with the idea of complementing the scores and the rankings with dashboards. On the trends, I think there's no perfect way to do this. Our way is to look backwards. So we look backwards, we look at what was the annual growth rate, and then we extrapolate that into the future, and we see whether this is sufficient to meet the target or not. Obviously, this we can have a long conversation about this, but there's obviously other ways to do this. We put a lot of hopes in all the policy trackers as a way also to have a more forward-looking approach to this. So it's one thing to look, at what happened in the past, but a government might be doing very great things over 1 year or two, and that might lead to very great progress on a short amount of time. So the policy trackers and the work of the climate action tracker, for instance, that are able to assess whether countries are on track or off track to achieve the objective of the Paris Agreement. Not looking at the trend, only at the trend backwards, but also looking at the government strategies and actually government actions as well to make a judgment on whether we are on track or not. I think this is really interesting. But for our report, we limit ourselves to a very, let's say, across-the-board methodology that we apply across all indicators and all goals. And this is how we come up with a visual for the arrows. I think that's what I can say. I hope this answers the question here. Yep.
Thank you so much. And we have the second question from Avunch. NSO and SDSN collaboration on reporting capacities, especially on the web portal design. Could you say something?
Yes. So here, I think, so the SDG index and dashboards is one part of the work, and that's the work I coordinate in SDSN. We have also a thematic research network on data and statistics that have lots of programs and that work very closely, not on monitoring, let's say, all of the SDGs for all the countries, but really on trying to collaborate with specific organizations, NSOs, or private sector institutions to see how we can develop better measures. And so they have, for instance, an initiative called Data for Now that are trying to come up for key headline indicators to make sure that we have very timely information available. So one of the issues in our report, for instance, is that because of the timelines in data reporting, our report usually assesses the previous governments, actually. So, in the best case scenario, at the global level, we have, 2 years time lag, sometimes 3 years, sometimes even more. But I think we do need to have more and more timely data available, at least for some of the key headline measures, leveraging all sorts of technologies and sources of data that might be accessible. And so that's an interesting program. And for this, it's an extensive collaboration across really many data providers, and that will be led by the Trends network. But as far as I am concerned, within the team that's producing the SDG index and dashboards, we do not do any, let's say, capacity development exercise or anything of the sort. There's obviously the work of the Paris 21 team as well, that's doing lots of capacity development and things like this. But this is not what we do here in the team.
Thank you so much. And we have another question from Cara Williams from Canada. You noted you only use validated information. Is that correct? And then following up, you noted the use of big data. Is that validated, and if so, by whom? As you know, in big data, variance may be low, but bias can be large.
Yeah, no, indeed. I think what I meant is that I was giving examples of the types of data that we could be using. In the global edition, I don't have an example of a data point that is completely created from big data, but that's obviously one source of information that is being used more and more. What we do have is indicators that come from satellite imagery or from expert research and models created by researchers. But these are, if we do come across a good measure or indicator created from big data, obviously within the team we would still do some checks. We would still check face validity, construct validity, conversion validity. We'll just try to come up with some sort of assessment of whether this makes sense or not. So we do obviously check the quality of each of the measures that we integrate. What I meant is that we do not have the capacity to check individual data points submitted by countries, especially to ensure comparability. But we do obviously check that that the data are valid and reliable.
Thank you so much, Guillaume. And we have no question to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming and for your interesting presentation.
Thank you very much.
And dear speakers, we thank you for your interesting presentations and your comprehensive reply to all questions have been asked. And we have learned a lot from your experience, and we have received lots of useful information on which it is worth thinking, and some good case studies that could be added to the second edition to the roadmap on statistics for SDG. And we have looked at using SDG data from different perspectives, statistical office, international organization, expert community. We've seen an example of how cooperation between the statistical office and business towards the 2030 agenda can be. Statistics Poland showed us what a role business could play in the implementation of the 2030 agenda and how statistics can assist the assessment of business impact on SDGs. From Petra's presentations, we've learned how you need to measure progress towards inclusive and sustainable industrialization, how they collect and analyze data and reporting for SDG 9 indicators. And we learned a little more about the SDG index and approaches of the expert community to assess and the progress of countries in achieving sustainable development goals. Thank you very much. And Joanne, do you have anything to add?
No, I just like to echo your thanks to everyone and to everyone who took part and to those who stayed and listened. We've still got 90 people on the line, so that's really impressive. And thank you, Tina and Stella, for all your work to organise these. There was one yesterday which was really fascinating, and there's another tomorrow, but perhaps Tina can tell us more about what that one is, and we'll meet again then.
Yes, thank you, Natalia and Joanne, for very good moderation. And again, the webinar today was, I think, very useful and very interesting. I provided also now at the end in the chat there some comments concerning this COVID-19, because we had in the questions that we collected through the registration form, there were a few questions about that, and I think it's in a way on everyone's mind, but it was a little bit outside actually the topic of today's webinar. So I'm wondering that maybe there would be maybe we should have a separate webinar on that topic, not concerning trying to analyze what are the impacts of the virus, but trying to analyze and see what the statistical offices have to do in this situation and how does it impact their work. But in any case, thank you for the very good session today. For all who participated, we had at the peak again 107 participants. The next one will be on Monday. And the topic there will be the national indicators and voluntary national reports. And I think Stella maybe already sent out information about this webinar and the information also how to connect this on our website. So we are looking forward to see everyone again on Monday at the same time, 3 o'clock Central European Summer Time. And until then, have a very there is still tomorrow as a working day, but then after that, have a very nice weekend, relax and stay safe and keep the social distance so that you don't increase these numbers of how many people have the virus. So thank you for everyone and goodbye.
Thank you, Tina. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.